So, welcome to the third segment of this very interesting podcast about the second revelation of the story of Adam and Eve. We're going to talk now about the fall of Adam and Eve, that moment where we coincide with the first book of the Bible, the Genesis. So, start to point out some of the interesting facts about these relationships and really redefining. That's a word that we use here a lot, redefining this story, and also taking into account other stories, because we also talked about how myth has transcended and has created our civilization. So here in this story, we're going to talk about the fall that has echoed throughout the religious tradition for thousands of years, often simplified into a tale of temptation and disobedience. But the deeper story reveals a far more complex struggle, the challenge of uplifting a troubled world faster than it was ready for. When the plan to accelerate a human process failed, the garden collapsed, and humanity once again faced the long path of rebuilding civilization. So let's dive in.
I think I want to start this segment with saying that to me this part is really heartbreaking.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
When we're talking about Dalmatian, everything we're talking about an insidious, malicious betrayal of our whole planet and people and future.
Mm-hmm.
We're not talking about that here. Uh, what we're going to be talking about is totally super heartbreaking. Yeah. So
Yeah, yeah.
um, I just wanted to say that.
Yeah, good, good.
um,
Thank you. It gets us into perspective and tone.
yeah. So I think what we really, really need to keep in the back of our minds as a background to paint what we're going to be talking about in this segment on is what Adam and Eve actually faced on this planet. So we
Uh-huh.
already talked about that they were supposed to pick up and carry on what the divine or planetary administration was supposed to have built for them, right?
Mm-hmm.
There was nothing. Our planet was isolated, so none of the planetary circuits of communication or anything like that were functioning. They had no one to talk to. There was one connection to the celestial um, government, I guess, the spiritual side that they
Mm-hmm.
could talk to, and that was, and this is, I love this part, is an archangel. No, sorry, a seraphim named
Okay.
Salonia, who is recorded in the Bible as the voice in the garden.
Okay. See, this is where it gets
Yeah,
interesting. We start to see where everything comes from, right?
right. So if they needed to communicate or find things out, it was Salonia who would speak to them and talk to them about things that were going
Okay.
on. Um, that's all they had, and they're so and just picture that you're so used to having like how would you feel if you didn't have the internet? So not having that communication that you've been used to all of your lives, and we're talking a celestial, not eternal from no beginning, but from hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of years old,
Yeah,
having that constantly, and then suddenly nothing.
yeah, yeah,
Incredibly isolating, and just like imagine how much that sucks out of you, right?
yeah, yeah.
Um, And on top of that, they have this active resistance from Caligastia and the Celestial Rebels who are still on the planet. So, things are pretty stacked against them.
There is an evil empire out there.
Yeah, yes. So, this is the background that I think we need to paint the rest of this story on,
Yeah,
and it's
yeah,
important to remember what they were up against, right?
yeah.
So, getting into the story now. So, they're in the garden and they're doing their thing and they're building up the population of what's referred to as the violet race.
Yeah.
Why the violet race is because of how Adam and Eve actually looked. We haven't
Okay.
actually mentioned that, but Adam and Eve are described as 8 feet tall,
Mm-hmm.
just a little bit tall, and they had a skin of what's described as violet hue,
Okay.
and their skin glowed.
Okay.
So, and you got to remember, we're talking about divine beings here, so they're not going to be exactly like us. But I think one of the anecdotes of that really quickly is that so what they would do at nighttime is they would, put wraps on or whatever their clothes were. But obviously they wouldn't have anything on their heads, and their heads would still sort of
Okay.
glow, right?
That's where all
And
the yara came from, right?
that's where halos come
Yeah.
from. Yeah, in all of the religious iconography and stuff like that. Any sage or religious or person like that always has a halo around them, and it's because of Adam and Eve.
Okay,
I
got
think
it.
that kind of stuff's really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, um, that was a tangent. I'm sorry.
No, 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 no.
But so they're doing their thing in the garden and they're building up their civilization, but they're encountering an incredible amount of resistance once they go past the borders, the wall that we're talking about, and try and establish relations with the outside tribes and stuff like that. So now we're probably about 120 years out from when they arrived and started their mission in the garden.
Mhm.
Um, things are going frustratingly slow for both Adam and Eve, and they have managed to get things going with some of the neighboring tribes, a confederation of tribes
Okay.
outside the gate, and they have sort of a group of captains, I guess, is sort of how it's described, where they would. That's sort of how things were organized. He has
Mhm.
I wouldn't describe it militarily, but they were his main guys,
Yeah.
like the
Yeah.
middle managers. I don't know
Yeah,
if you
yeah.
want to call it that. And they had another guy who was the chief of the Confederation of Tribes, who was really, really taken with Adam and Eve and their mission, and he wanted to do everything that he could to help them out, and he became their right hand guy, and his name was Sarapatasha.
Okay.
So we've got his name.
Interesting.
Um, so when we're talking about memories of everything that's happened, and we'll go into more detail about exactly what happened, but just keep in mind that the biblical account of this is very distorted, and the memory
Yeah.
is it's just it's so distorted that it really doesn't do justice to any of what we're talking about or what happened anymore. But what I find it absolutely extraordinary is that the story is almost exactly echoed in the legend of King Arthur and Guinevere and Lancelot.
Interesting that you point this out.
Yeah. Um, I encourage everybody to once we've sort of laid out the story of what
Yeah.
happens and stuff like that, to sit back and let those comparisons percolate.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
definitely.
so we'll if you can remind me to go back to that after I've said the story, and we can sort of
Definitely,
compare the
definitely. No,
characters
no,
a little bit.
definitely.
Yeah,
I have it right
yeah,
here. No worries.
yeah. Good. Yeah. So what actually happened then? So Um, we're about 120 years in or so, and we've got this council, the confederation of tribes that they're slowly building, but it's still frustratingly hard to move out from that, right? They're trying to establish tribal relations and trade relations with the tribes, just to try and expand a little bit, try and get the culture out from the garden as best they can while they're
Mhm.
building up their population reserves. Um, it's just, yeah, it was so hard, even with the help of these captains and Sarapatasha.
Mhm.
Um, again, just so frustrating, right? And Eve even more than Adam, um, was particularly frustrated.
Okay.
She felt this frustration a lot more, and her and I guess just to back up really, it needs to be said that Caligastia would visit the garden quite often,
Was he
and
welcome,
he would.
and what would happen?
Well, it's pretty hard to stop a spiritual being with
Got it.
stone and brick walls, right?
Got it.
So Adam and Eve could see him, but nobody else could,
Okay.
right? So he would visit, and he would try and win them over to his side, the rebellion, and get them to rebel against God and the divine universe and everything, right?
Mhm.
Um,
Hence,
and
hence, well, I think just real quick the comparison. You know, the snake, and you know how it appears. You know, I don't know. Maybe that's it. I don't know. In the biblical story, you know, the biblical account.
yeah,
I don't
yeah,
know.
yeah. I think there's an analogy there, yeah, because it's the snake that sort of offers the temptation, right? So
Yeah. Yeah.
um, Caligastia, based on the absolute devastation of planetary culture, um, Adam and Eve were pretty inoculated to anything that Caligastia was trying to get them to do because, the evidence of the absolute total mess that he made is just everywhere, right? So,
Mhm.
they were just like, see you later. So he tried to do an end run on Eve because it just wasn't working. His so-called frontal assault, trying to get them to come over to his
Yeah.
side. So
Yeah.
he thought he'd just do a little sort of maneuver on Eve.
Okay.
And he put this idea in Serapatatia's head that maybe it would be a good idea if the neighboring Nodite tribes could have a violet race child born to them now, in order to cement relations and start building up the civilization there.
Okay.
Awesome idea and everything, but it's not what the plan is, right?
Exactly. This is the important thing. Because
Yeah,
let's put it in simple terms. He's trying to say that there should be a meeting, something beyond this, or
they need. He was advocating for a child basically,
okay,
um, born into his tribe with violet blood.
okay,
Yeah.
okay, got it.
Because it would uplift the because he knew the mission was to uplift the genetics of the population and everything. So
Okay.
he thought, well, let's kickstart
No,
this. Let's do a quick shortcut. Let's do a shortcut, right?
it makes
And
sense. It makes sense, of
yeah,
course, definitely.
yeah,
A lot of bad things.
logical.
Yeah, a lot of bad
Yeah,
decisions sometimes make sense, but you have to look. You
yeah,
know, that's why it's important to really step back and understand. You know, just a
yeah,
big a side note, but
yeah.
continue, please,
But
Derek.
but Adam and Eve are not supposed to procreate with anybody but
Exactly,
themselves.
that's the thing.
It's their children who are supposed to procreate with indigenous people on the planet. So big problem there.
Hmm.
And the idea of a shortcut is going to become a big problem as well.
Okay.
But again, we're talking, all of this background that we were talking about before is like, the frustration and the isolation. And
Yeah.
it's like, can
Yeah.
we not, it's been 120 years. Can we not do something to try and help this along?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, they talk, Sarah Patation and Eve talk about this and Eve sort of eventually gets won over to this. And and it needs to be said that Sarah Patation doesn't know he's being manipulated. Like he's very sincere in all of this.
Hmm.
He doesn't know he's been being manipulated by Caligastia.
Got it.
Um, Eventually Eve says, okay, let's do this.
Okay.
And so basically, yeah. So it took a long time for her to, come around to this, but basically she conceived a child not with Sarapatasha, but with the spiritual leader of the Confederation of Tribes,
Okay.
and his name was Kano or Kano,
Okay.
Cano. Okay.
Okay. Interesting that word.
And
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And the deed was done.
Okay.
So basically, she conceived a child with this Kano guy,
Okay.
the spiritual leader of the Confederation of Tribes, right? So when Adam found out,
And this is interesting
um,
because this is now, I mean, we look at it, we're talking about it as a very, political, genetical, mission.
it's got it all.
It's there,
It's got
but
it
what
all.
about the
Yeah,
relationship? This is the interesting thing.
right.
What about Adam and
Yeah,
Eve? They were a couple. What did
yeah,
this do to that relationship? So please, Derek,
yeah.
tell us.
Yeah, in terms of their personal relationship with each other, I don't think it really gets into that too much.
Yeah.
But Adam realized right away what it meant,
Okay.
what this transgression of their mission and mandate meant,
Okay.
and he was absolutely and totally heartbroken.
Okay.
And I think it's also important to realize that Adam and Eve, as this divine couple, this order of material sons and daughters, always work as a couple, man and woman, as a couple, always in everything that they do. Um, so he's like sitting there and he's like, oh my God, she's defaulted in the mission. Um, I'm going to be alone,
Yeah. 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 Okay.
right?
And
And
let's remember the sequence of what happened in the biblical story. Okay, please continue, Dirk.
right. So he decides, I'm going to go out and I'm going to commit the same transgression so I can share her fate and we can still be together.
Okay,
Um, so he goes out and he finds a Nodite Nephilim woman named
okay,
Leota,
okay,
and he basically conceived a child with her.
okay.
So in doing so, he committed the same transgression as Eve.
Got it.
So now
Bit
both of them
the
are
same
in
apple,
default.
right?
It's the apple,
It's
but
the apple.
that's the apple, okay?
And
And it's not just chomping an apple from a tree.
but you know
Um,
what? You know what? I kind of knew this or hinted at. I don't know at the early age. I don't know. I don't want to say a kid, but I mean, the serpent, and in archetypes,
yeah,
and what really teaches us is the primal source, the one of the most basic, which is also very linked to sex. It's, I mean, in the conception and all that creative
yeah,
energy. So it's really
yeah.
interesting, that we look at the archetypes in the biblical narrative and how that, translated from the original narrative, right?
The seed is still kind of there, but it's
Yeah,
it's
it is. It
very,
is.
very hard to pick it out, right? Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So continue,
So
please, Derek. This is so interesting.
yeah, so we're at the point, they've both made this transgression, right?
Hmm.
And that's basically a default in their mission because
Okay.
they're stipulated in their mission is they are not supposed to be procreating with indigenous people of the planet.
Exactly.
Now, why is that such a big deal? Well, first of all, it goes against the divine plan of how everything's supposed to go out and the genetic uplift and the spread and everything, which is way above my pay grade for figuring out exactly.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah. That's
But
something that we don't have to go into that. No, no need. Yeah.
right. So now what we kind of have to understand is the mechanics of how this becomes an actual default and a fall. The fall of Adam and Eve. It's not the
Definitely.
fall of man. We have to differentiate. Man didn't fall. It was Adam and Eve. They're divine beings.
Yeah.
They're actually our planetary mother and father
Yeah.
is how, yeah. we should probably be looking at them.
Very important. Thanks for pointing
Yeah.
that out, Derek.
Yeah, but they're divine beings. So the mechanics of how this actually becomes a default and a fall has to do with the tree of life,
Hmm.
which of course we find in the Bible, right?
Yeah.
Now, we've already talked about how the fruit of the tree of life allows when they eat it, because there's specific modifications in their body. Well, that's for the Anunnaki, but Adam and Eve were divine beings, so they already had all of this
Yeah,
stuff in their bodies
they came with that from the factory, factory preset.
from the factory, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And and so this mechanism within them that allowed them to take advantage of the qualities of this fruit, which gave them immortality.
Hmm.
um it was dependent on an unbroken spiritual connection with the divine mother spirit.
Okay.
um I don't know how else to say that.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
um
We can let it point it out and
yeah.
have other podcasts
but
about the Mother
but
Spirit.
basically it relied on an unbroken spiritual circuit
Okay, and they
for
broke
that
that circuit.
mortality to be maintained. So what would break a spiritual circuit like that, right?
Hmm.
It's discord with the will of God,
Okay.
with the mandates of their mission.
Oh, yes. So they
That
basically
that
yeah,
breaks
yeah.
that breaks the circuit.
That
It
makes a
breaks
lot
the
of
circuit.
sense, and this is
Yeah,
such an important role that you can. I mean, uh, it's one strike and you're out, right?
yeah. So the other thing that I think we need to mention really quickly is that only Adam and Eve had that mechanism in them. Their children didn't have that mechanism.
Okay.
So it's not like they could just keep eating the fruit and they would be immortal. It was only Adam and Eve.
Okay.
So it was part of how it all works, that their children, and that's one of the reasons why Adam and Eve weren't supposed to participate in procreating with
Yeah.
the rest of the
Yeah.
inhabitants,
That's
because
why
they're
it sets
they're
everything.
above all of that, right?
It defaults
Yeah,
and sets everything off track. Definitely.
yeah. So breaking that spiritual circuit stops their ability to maintain their immortality.
Okay.
So why is that important? Why is their being immortal? Why does that make it a fall? Okay, I'm not saying that properly. So why is it that not having immortality means a failure of the mission? Thanks, that's better.
Yeah.
So it's because in order to skillfully and strategically oversee the injection of their divine genetics and the blending of their children over time, thousands and thousands of years, somebody needs to oversee that.
Uh,
And
Yeah.
that's what Adam and Eve are supposed to be doing, and that's why they're immortal.
Yeah.
And if you don't have that, then the whole thing crashes and burns, because there's no one to manage it. There's no one to oversee it. Over time, over thousands of years, people forget. And that's exactly what happened.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so that is the mechanics of how it is actually considered a default of their mission. They lost their immortality and they weren't able to function as the overseers of this biological uplift.
So that is really really sad, and
Yeah.
now bringing it back to King Arthur and Guinevere, this part of the story, I think that's where this
Yeah.
kind of makes a lot of sense.
Right. So if you want to make direct comparisons, I mean, obviously you have Adam and Arthur and Guinevere and Eve. So King Arthur and Guinevere and Adam and Eve. That's pretty straightforward, I think.
Yeah.
Sarapatasha is, in this case, I think he would be, well, Sarapatasha and Cano, they're sort of two people, where in the Arthurian legend it's only one
Yeah.
person, and
Exactly.
that's Lancelot.
Yeah.
It's Sir Lancelot.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, right? If you think of the person who basically prepared the way for this high civilization and set it all up and all of that kind of stuff, um, it's obviously Van and Merlin, right? Like we
Yeah,
talked
yeah,
about, like what Van did over the 160,000 year period to prepare the way. We know that Merlin prepared the way for Arthur. You know, I mean, even comparing Camelot with Eden,
yeah, yeah,
I
definitely.
mean, it's striking, absolutely striking.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
and you have the adversary and Morgan Le Fay and Caligastia.
Yeah, no, no,
You
it's there.
have yeah,
The
we
archetypes are
haven't
there.
we haven't gotten this far yet, but you have the son, who is Cain and Mordred.
Yeah,
Eve's son is Cain. We'll talk about that in a minute.
yeah.
But it's all there, right? So and it's so specifically, almost exactly the story that I'm telling right now of Adam and Eve. It's almost scary.
Well,
And you kind of and I sit there and I kind of have to wonder if there isn't some sort of celestial manipulation of that legend to help us remember an even
definitely.
more important story. Yeah,
Definitely, definitely.
right?
I believe
Yeah,
so. That's the way that we find and we structure our beliefs. So, but let's
yeah,
continue with the story because
yeah,
it gets very
yeah,
interesting. So,
yeah, yeah, yeah. So, all this happened, and word got out to the inhabitants of the garden. I'm not necessarily talking just about Adam and Eve's children, I'm talking about all the other inhabitants too, the workers and everybody who were already there. They freaked out. They absolutely furious. They spilled out of the garden and attacked the Nodite settlement and absolutely slaughtered and killed everybody
okay,
because it's a pretty belligerent race, the Nodite race.
okay,
So we're still dealing with a lot of primitive sentiment and stuff like that. I mean, I haven't had the chance to really uplift it over
yeah,
the space of 100 years. They went out and just completely killed everybody. Now we're talking chain reactions here.
yeah,
Okay, so
yeah.
the the cousin tribes that are further out hear about this and they freak out and they gather this massive army to march on the garden in
Definitely. I mean,
revenge.
you're
Right,
threatened to an annihilation. You'd rather strike first,
right,
right?
right. So Adam and Eve, they find out about this. They find about this army, and they're like, "Okay, what do we do?" And they decide, "We're not going to sit here and get into some huge battle militarily. We're going to vacate the garden."
Okay,
And this is them being cast out of the garden.
definitely.
But they're not being cast out of the garden by God. They're being cast out of the garden by the consequences of their
The
actions.
situation, exactly. Look at that. How that
Yes.
really, it's not really God that is, taking out that grace. It's them that really,
Yeah.
created the default and therefore were cast out of that Eden that they created.
Yeah.
Oh, that's
That's right.
beautiful. Awesome,
And
awesome.
this is where we go back to when I was talking about the runner-up location for the garden when Van and his crew were looking for places to build the garden.
Okay.
So the runner-up location, and Adam knew about this, was in between the rivers in Mesopotamia,
Okay.
um, where the rivers were narrow enough that they could build a wall and all that kind of stuff. So they knew about this, and they said, "Okay, let's go that way."
And then we
Um,
kind of start tying in the dots with the more of the biblical story and more of the
yeah,
historical story of mankind and civilization and all
that's right.
what we
We're
already
getting
know.
a lot closer. We're getting closer and closer to recorded history and
Exactly.
more accepted myth and legend, right?
Definitely. Okay.
So The other thing we should probably mention is Cano, the father of the child with Eve.
Mhm.
He was killed in the initial attack
Okay.
when the inhabitants of the garden went out and killed everybody.
Okay.
Seraphitasha, looking around, just going, "Oh my God, what have I done?" He went and he drowned himself in the river.
Oh.
So, just to tie up those loose ends.
Exactly, exactly.
Yeah.
And then now that we have AI, this is interesting for you, our audience that would maybe like to try it out. Why don't you go and use any AI and kind of trying to compare the story of Adam and Eve from the Urantia book with King Arthur and Guinevere. Might be
Yeah,
some.
that's a rabbit hole that I've
Mm,
been down.
all right, so I wouldn't have ever imagined, Derek. I don't know where you would have where you ended, but maybe that's for another time. But anyway,
No,
so
it's good. It's good. Yeah, there's a few more characters that we can talk about, but they're a little more minor.
all right.
But
Anyways,
it's good. Yeah.
okay,
Um, so basically, they start trucking on over to this secondary area, and that's where they establish the second Garden of Eden.
okay,
Okay, so they're cast out of this first idyllic one, and they go and in the Bible, they're saying, they have to work the fields
yeah.
and with the sweat and the dust and all of that kind of stuff. And that's pretty much what it was like. Like, they arrived in a beautiful garden. It had taken 80 years of construction before they got there. There was a lot of stuff waiting for them when they got there.
Yeah, I think the
Um,
vegetation and everything was a little bit better. The kind of climate
oh,
and everything.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. When they got to their location of the second garden, they basically had to start from scratch.
Yeah.
And again, the first thing that they start building is a wall.
Oh,
So they build a wall to the north between where the rivers come sort of close. This is a 57-mile wall
okay.
that they ended up building. And the bottom with the rivers were wide enough at the time that
Yeah.
they were good enough defense. And to the south, they don't really say too much about what was going on there. It's possible that might have actually been where the Persian Gulf reached up to,
Okay.
but I can't say for sure.
Got it.
But anyway, that's where they established the second garden. Now, on the way to the second garden, Cain was born,
Okay.
and Cain is the son of Eve and Cano. So he was half violet, and he was half um, nodite, I guess,
Okay. Got it.
Nephilim, right?
Interesting.
And it's interesting when you start talking about different percentages of violet blood, because when you look at the legends, especially the Sumerian legends, when you look at the story of Gilgamesh,
Mm-hmm.
especially, he is described, and I might get this backwards, but two-thirds God and one-third human.
Okay. Got it.
And And when we're talking about God here, they're basically talking about Adam and Eve's children. So descent, like he's got that inheritance in him, two-thirds of it somehow, and one-third is
I
not.
think a lot of
So,
the mythical, when you look at Greek and a lot of other mythology, how many times it's been represented of this mixture of human and divine
right.
genetics, right?
Yes, yeah. So that's where this idea of a demigod comes
Yeah,
from.
yeah.
It's like the son of a god, who conceived a child with a human mother or father or whatever, right?
Interesting,
So
interesting.
that went on for the second time, because we know, with the fall of Dalmatia, the rebels had to resort to sexual reproduction, and we had the first case of the sons of God going into the daughters of men.
Yeah,
And now we're going to have a second case of that coming from the second garden, but several thousand years later, right?
interesting.
Um, so they're building and okay, yeah. So Cain was was born on the way to the second garden. Now, who's Abel? Abel, because, Cain and Abel, that actually happened.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Abel was the first son of Adam and Eve born in the second garden.
Okay.
So he was full blood violet. So he was Adam and Eve's son. And a lot of the problems between Abel and Cain, or Cain and Abel, is that Cain wasn't fully Adam and Eve's child, and
Got it.
Abel used to lay into Cain like you wouldn't believe about that.
Okay, got it.
And Cain did slay Abel
Okay.
because of that. Um, and he did eventually have to leave a lot, mostly because of that.
They
And he
banned,
did
yeah,
venture.
definitely. So
They
he
they
was
didn't
banished.
banish. They didn't banish him. Um, he he was in the same way that Mordred was in
Okay,
the legend, right? He's this constant reminder of the fall, of the default, right?
got it.
He's the embodiment, the physical
But he
embodiment
leaves. That's the
of.
interesting thing,
Yeah.
that we see in
So
the Bible, that he goes
yeah,
to the
he
other land,
decide
right?
he's encouraged to leave. He's thinking maybe I should leave, and
Yeah,
Adam and Eve are like, yeah, well, if you want to, we would support that. Right?
yeah,
So, it's not in a super bad way or
yeah,
whatever,
yeah,
but there's that going on. He does go to the land of Nod. But now we know what the land of Nod is and who was there.
yeah, yeah,
It's the Eastern Nephilim who are living there, the descendants of their leader Nod, who are living there. And this is the southwest part of Iran now, right? Um, so that's where he went, and he established a city and was actually quite instrumental in building up really good relations with that group of people and the inhabitants of the second garden. So in some ways, what Seraphitation and Eve were hoping for in having a child like that actually did come to fruition, but it was just the wrong way
yeah,
to have
yeah,
that happen, and it was a contravention of the mission.
yeah,
So that's what happened to Cain,
yeah.
and that's all true from the Bible. Like, yeah, I don't know if there was a jawbone or any of that kind of stuff.
But how
Um,
interesting, how everything ties in, and when you look at the original story, what really happened and how that, evolved into this, we make sense of it all, of
yeah.
this story, and I think we covered everything, right? Because
Well,
next
there's a
time,
couple of things I could say, but
yeah,
just to close it off, if that's all right.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
definitely,
Okay. Cool. So they did build up the garden, the second garden, and they did, and this is the thing that really attracts me to Adam and Eve and why they're kind of my favorites, is because just like every one of us humans,
hmm,
they failed. They had
definitely,
this failure, and and they spent the rest of their lives doing everything they could to redeem themselves based on that. And for some reason, I have an affinity to that.
and tell us what happened. I
It's
think this
it's
is
so
important
it's
because,
so it's so different from all of the other divine bestowals that we've
yeah,
had,
yeah, it's a love story,
right?
basically,
It's a
right?
love story, but it's also it's a story of picking yourself up by your
Definitely,
bootstraps, even though
definitely.
you've failed
No,
incredibly.
and yeah,
Yeah,
it's a struggle love
yeah,
story, which is not just like,
yeah,
the banal love stories. And I think this is important because we know now that, they lost the ability to have eternal life, like we were said, because they
yeah,
can't eat the fruit anymore because
yeah,
they transgressed the spiritual mandates. Now they eventually die. So what happens there?
yeah. So they did die. Adam died. He was 530 years old when he died,
Okay,
and Eve had died about 19 years before that.
okay.
So they just basically died of old age.
And they went into
really.
again back
But
into spirit or into a different
well, they went back into the universe career, but they weren't the order of material sons and daughters anymore. They had been degraded
okay.
to what we are. Ascending sons and daughters is what we're referred to.
Okay. Okay.
So they're actually ascended mortals now.
Okay. Interesting.
So now the other thing that I should point out really quickly is that they did leave as many of their progeny as they could in the time that was left to them.
Okay.
So they built up their reserves as absolutely much as they could in
Okay.
the time that they had. And it's nothing like what we were supposed to have, but still pretty potent. So it's done some really good things,
Definitely.
um, as it was supposed to. Um, It's interesting. There's a guy in the Urantia community who's done some really good research on this. His name's Halbert Katzen,
Okay.
and he did a report, and he has found um, that there's been some research on a gene called the microencephalin gene,
Okay.
which shows marked improvement and growth in the human brain about 38,000 years ago.
All right.
Yeah. So it's actually really incredible stuff that's coming out in the research.
Like we said,
And
it's simply things that we do not know about, and that eventually
yeah,
will pop up, and we kind of put the puzzle back in together and understand it better,
yeah,
right?
yeah. So it's good. So the the ultimate result of this is that after 160,000, not that's not true. It's 460,000 years of unbroken, having an unbroken line of a physical manifestation of the divine administration on our planet. So we're talking about the Anunnaki until the rebellion broke out. Then we're talking about Van until Adam and Eve came, and then Adam and Eve until they died, and that broke the line.
There wasn't any celestial agencies that could
There's
communicate.
no more physical manifestation of the divine administration on our planet
Interesting
anymore
thing to know.
because Adam and Eve died, right? Um, we'll talk a little bit more about other bestowals, but in terms of having a normal planet has the 100 visible staff still there with their associates, which is 200,
Mm-hmm.
and then you do have Adam and Eve after that happens. So there's on a normal planet there's a massive like physical manifestation of the divine administration
Guiding
on
us and
a
and
planet,
and and serving with
guiding
us,
us.
and yeah,
Yes,
structuring with us.
yes,
Yeah.
yeah. So nothing for us now, right? And so within, a few thousand years, here we are again, back to almost nothing, back to
Yeah.
tribalism, the advanced society. Um, they tried to keep it going as long as they could. And I mean, we do have a very, very advanced civilization bursting forth in the historical record at the beginning of our historical record in the Sumerians
Yeah.
with all of the math, all of the astronomy, all of these tools of civilization in place, and that can be traced directly back to Adam and Eve, and with the Sumerians themselves back even further to their traditions because they're the direct descendants of the central rebels, right? Nephilim. So
Interesting.
yeah,
Interesting.
so some of that culture did survive, here and there, but we do not have that physical manifestation anymore to help guide things. And so we're kind of on our own. I mean, there's still hosts and legions of celestial helpers working with and for us
But behind the
behind the
scenes,
scenes.
oh, that
But
synchronicity, by
yeah,
the way. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And so in the long run, that's going to do us really well, because what that creates is a type of ascendant being who is able to believe without seeing.
Yeah.
See, on a normal planet, you can see, and all you have to do is believe what you're being told. But on a planet like this, it creates a very, very specific type of being who can believe without seeing, and that's a really
That's
important
what we are.
distinction,
And that's what we are.
and that's what we will be credited with, yeah, as we move forward. So it's not all bad.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so that's bad. Um, we don't have that continuity of culture, of
Yeah.
history, of divine guidance, or anything like that. But I think, and again, we already sort of said this, but it has to be said, there has never been a fall of man.
Important thing.
Adam and Eve's so-called sin, the original sin that everybody talks about, it's not a sin of humanity, right? It was judged as a default of their mission, but it wasn't open rebellion like Caligastia wanted them to do.
Yeah. Yeah. It was a
It was a
mistake.
mistake. Yeah,
Again.
and it
There
was
we
it
go.
was judged as a mistake, right?
Yeah.
So all of these things that we're talking about, they're not humanity's failures, right?
Yeah.
There's no original sin on the part of humanity for us to
This
have
is
to
very
atone
important
for.
into exactly. This is so
Very much
important.
so.
This is very important.
These are failures of our divine administrators and civilizational co-creators. It's not us, it's them.
Yeah.
We're the victims
Yeah.
of the consequences, but there is no original sin on our part that we have to atone for, and that's really, really important.
Which is going to make the case for later on what happens with Jesus into the why he came here. So I mean, this is very interesting. But
Yes.
I think we can. We're about to close here. Just I'm going to give you
Yep.
because
That's it.
we are okay. Great, because I mean, this is. I mean, and it took us. I think this is going to be a long podcast
It's a bit long.
because we
Yeah.
had to get
It's
all
a
this.
big story.
It's a very big story. It's a very interesting story, but it's the genesis. This is where, if we do not clarify all of this at this point in biblical history, this is the starting point. I mean, everything else falls from this story. So it's very important that
Yes.
we understand this, and especially the part about the original sin, that it does not fall upon
Yes.
us. There is no
Yep.
such thing. And we are, as we know, and we learned in this and many other things in life, we are accountable for our actions, not to the actions of anybody else, and that's
Yep.
why the original sin really does not have any power over us. But I understand, the story of and everything, the adversities, everything that happened there, the default, and very, very interesting to understand, and that we're going to learn later. I think it very interesting to point out how, as you've been saying, there's no material administration anymore, any material guidance as we had up to this point, which is what will create the situation, or why the next revelation, the third revelation, came into play, which is what starts with what or continues with the biblical narrative, and what we're going to be
Yep.
learning in another podcast. So, Derek, it was awesome.
It's a good
Anything
one.
else that
Yeah.
before we leave?
There was something. It's just sort of gone out of my brain right now. Oh, yes. So Adam and Eve, even though they're ascendant beings like us right now, they are actually still very involved in the divine administration of our planet. I think that needs to be said,
Right.
but not in the way as originally intended. They're part of the celestial part of the administration now, but they are still very, very involved and interested in everything that
They're
goes on with our
actively
planet.
helping us still.
Yeah.
All right.
We're
That's
never going to have a replacement planetary mother and father. They are our Adam and Eve. It's just that they're going to have to help us in another capacity. That's all.
awesome. Awesome. That's
But
good
they
to
are
know.
doing it. Yeah.
Good to
So
know.
it's a good note to end on.
Yeah. Thanks. Well, thanks a lot, Derek. It's been really interesting, and it's really informative. So thanks a lot. And we're going to be
My
continuing
pleasure.
with this. So, and to you, our audience, thank you for joining us in this long journey. And remember to subscribe, tell people about this if you liked it. They might find a lot of good things. And stay tuned. We're not going to, next episode is not going to be next week on the continuing, but stay tuned. In a couple of weeks, we're going to continue with these revelation stories. So I'm Santiago Neeland. This is The Divine Within. Until next time, take care and carpe diem. On the Divine Within podcast, we'll share real conversations to help you find a personal connection with God. My goal is to support your faith, growth, and journey toward discovering the divine within yourself. Join us to deepen your faith and spiritual journey.